You can't grow in the wrong soil. And you have to look at the situations like, are you in the right groupings? Are there the right people around you? When you're passionate about what you do and your idea, every piece of information has perfect value to you. If you put a pitch in this format, what is it? How does it work? Are you sure is the A? And then can you do it? You find that you build your pitch the way people understand information.
Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of the podcast in partnership with Najahi Events and our awesome new sponsors, Vault Hill. More about them later. Okay, today's guest is an award-winning film director, a veteran television producer, C-level sales and presentations coach. He's a keynote speaker, a top-rated podcast host, and a columnist for Forbes. Whew. He's been named to the Hollywood Reporter's 30 most powerful reality TV sellers and is widely recognized as one of the great creative sales leaders in Hollywood. We all love a salesperson, don't we? Especially me. His 3-minute rule has helped make him one of the most sought-after C-level consultants in the USA. Let's get him onto the show because we're going to have a great conversation about how you pitch the right way. This is Brant Pinvidic. Vault Hill is the world's first human-centric metaverse that's opened its doors for brands and entities to launch their presence in the metaverse in only 48 hours. This is the fastest activation ever and the first time ever any metaverse has offered this. Upon this activation process, brands will receive free virtual land in Vault Hill City and can give life to their metaverse presence by buying buildings in the Vault Hill marketplace and deploy it on their dedicated VLAND. Then brands can customize their land using unbounded creativity. They can display their own NFTs or upload different media, logos, or digital creations to start to capitalize from their digital assets. Go check out vaulthill.io. And lastly, thank you to Najahi Events, who have been sponsoring us now on the podcast for over a year. Najahi bring motivational speakers to the region to help inspire, educate, and motivate you to achieve better success and live a better life. Thank you for coming to join us on the podcast today.
Absolutely.
It's good you've got a good energy about you, man. It's nice to see someone that comes in with a bit of energy about them. Are you an optimistic, positive type of person, do you think?
I mean, I'm definitely a glass is always full, and I don't even know what that would mean if the glass was empty. I don't even hear you if you even talk like that. I only know delusional optimism. That is my world.
So what kind of people frustrate you then?
I think there are people that look at every situation and they see problems. And so that I find really difficult to deal with because I don't live like that. I don't think like that. Like I said, it's delusional a lot of times in my world. And it started, as a kid, a protectionism mechanism to, protect from being bullied or whatever it was. Who knows all of my issues growing up. But basically I've turned to this sort of delusional optimism. I only look for the positive things. So it's very difficult for me when someone is more pragmatic in their approach to life and they want to judge life on the merits of the situation. I'm like, I don't do that. I've committed to loving being on this podcast before I get here, even if you're no good. It's okay. Because I love it already. I'm already in love with being on this podcast. I've already committed to it.
You say delusional optimism. It's interesting, when you think about optimism and the alternatives to optimism, there aren't any.
Well, there's no good ones.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So it's like, what would you choose if you were making a choice? What would you choose? I mean, my dad will say, and he's nearly 80. He'll go, "I'm a realist."
That's exactly right.
I'm like, get away from me. I'm like, you're a cynic.
Yeah.
And he said, no, I'm a realist, Spence. You got to understand.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how does that help you?
Right.
With anything you do. Yeah. I mean, my dad plays golf. I mean, how can you be a realist playing golf? You've got to be an optimist. You've got to be looking he plays 3 times a week.
If you were a realist, you wouldn't play anymore.
Right? Yeah, pointless. So tell us a bit about your backstory. The people in the Middle East want to learn more about you. I know that you recently went to the Middle Est, so that was cool, yeah? You talking positively about Bahrain and Saudi.
Amazing.
You haven't been to Dubai yet?
Not yet, but that's next on my list.
Okay, so for all of the people in the Middle East and in the UK that listen to the podcast, tell us a bit about yourself.
So I grew up in Canada. I was a serial entrepreneur, mostly failed. I was one of those guys that had big ideas, could put things together, convince people to sort of rally up, and had operational sort of limitations in my ability to operate. And I just spent most of my time in Canada being effectively told directly or indirectly that I was crazy, that this was never going to work, that get a job. Like, why do you want to do things outside of the box? Why can't you just be normal? And then, I had tried to work on a television show. I had an idea for a television show when I was running a bar, and I thought it was a good idea. So I went and funded it with my own money. And anybody listening, don't ever do that. Don't ever do that. But I did it, and I couldn't sell it. And I was living in my parents' basement with my wife and my 2-year-old child. And my parents are like, you need to get a job. Like, this is over. And I just like, if I could just show the right people. And so I went down to the United States, and I had a producer that agreed to look at the material. And then that producer showed it to somebody else. And that went on for a week. And I had all these offers. And the next thing you know, I got this big offer from NBC to do the show. I had offers from companies to have me come and do development for them for TV shows. And I moved to the United States, and everything worked for me in Hollywood. It was like I found my people. It was like people who appreciated ideas. They appreciated big thinking. They appreciated thinking out of the box. They were can-do type people. And people ask me all the time, like how I love Hollywood and creating television shows. Like, not really. Like, it wasn't a dream of mine. It wasn't a passion. My passion was just trying to find something to be successful at and to be appreciated at. And so this industry showed me that so quickly that I became obsessed with just being as good as I could so I could get more people to tell me how great I am. Basically, my insecurity was like being filled for the first time in my life. And so that just propelled me to do well in Hollywood. And that was a great run. And I really enjoyed that. And so that became sort of the launch pad for everything after that.
So it's interesting you say that. People telling you that you were great made you feel good about yourself, and that kind of like kept feeding you.
That made me great.
But you found your kind of people, the kind of people that got you.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you think that was the genius in what you did? You were having the ability to find those kind of people that enabled you then to mushroom out.
Yes. It's like you can't grow in the wrong soil. And I speak for free at any school that wants me. I love trying to teach entrepreneurial sort of vigor to the next generation. And I say, like, you can't grow in the wrong soil. And so a lot of times what people do, and they get taught this, and we see this on TV, is that you can do anything, you can be anything, just put your mind to it. And it's like, no, it's not true. It's like you need to have what I call the reasonable probability of success. And you have to look at the situation as like, are you in the right groupings? Are there the right people around you? Are you in the right situation? Do you have something that could most likely be successful? And a lot of people get convinced that if they just work hard enough and believe in themselves, they can make an untenable situation work. And that's why I think people find so much struggle. And that's what I was doing. I had great ideas. I worked really hard. I was willing to do anything, but I was in a situation and a culture and an environment that didn't foster that. And so I couldn't be who I was supposed to be. And that's in business and as a person and as a husband and as a father and as a friend. Like, everything spawns from finding where you're supposed to be, where you can grow effectively. And when you find that, you love to do it. And that's why people sort of have that idea that if you do something you love, you'll be great at it. And it's like, yes, that's true, but you have to do something you love in an environment where it can be successful. And then all of a sudden you realize, like, I just want to keep doing this because it feels so good, finally, for me.
Were you driven by financial gain or success, or was it kind of like emotional payments that you were receiving from the kind of like the respect and accolade and engagement other people were giving you? That's
a really good question. I think that when I was in Canada, this is in my 20s, I think that the financial element of it was an overarching pain that was just always on my shoulders. It's like, how am I going to pay for anything? My wife had a great job, and I would just lose the money and trying different business ventures, and we were always struggling. And so there is that first level of like, I just don't want to struggle financially anymore. But, my first contract in Los Angeles was 5 times what my wife was making, like more money than we had made in the last 5 years. So, but it felt very like a thread. Like, at some moment, somebody's going to come in and be like, wait, you're not supposed to be here. Go back to Canada, right? And like, so the financial rewards were a benchmark of success, particularly here and in this industry. I create a big television show. I get a massive bonus. Everybody claps and they pat you on the back. And from like, I create television shows. So if you have a production company, nobody has a job unless I create the show. Unless I sell that show, everybody's sitting here wondering how they're going to get paid. So you can get away with a lot of like personality deficiencies in leadership in a company if you can get people jobs, right? And so that's what happened to me, where it's like everybody was like so happy that I was selling shows, and they didn't really pay attention to the fact that I don't run a company well. I do creative stuff. I try to make people like me, but running a company is very different.
Okay. My situation in comparison to that is for me, winning matters.
Yeah.
So if you said to me, look, you could be number one and you learn $100,000, or you can be number two and you learn $200,000, what would you take? I take number one all day, every day.
Yeah, well, that's because you have a bunch of money.
No. This was when I had no money.
Yeah, I don't believe that.
Okay, because for me, winning mattered.
No, I don't believe that.
Because it's true. Because as a youngster, for me, I had to win. And
Yes.
so I always thought that winning, okay, would lead me to the kind of like the bigger pot of gold eventually anyway. But it was that competitiveness.
Yes.
And if you look at some of I was in sales, and so the competitions that I won were against people that were formidable opponents to me back then.
Right.
But I just had to beat them.
Oh, I could see that.
It didn't matter what it was. I just had to beat them.
But why it worked for you is because there is no situation where first place is 100,000 and second place is 200,000. First place is 200,000. Second place is $25. That's the way the real world is. So that's why it works out. You must win, and then the financial rewards come with that, right? And that's sort of the world in the entrepreneurial space and the capitalistic space is like the winner gets the gold for the most part. And so a lot of times it feeds that drive and that fire. And so you get that a lot where it's like, oh, well, of course you're winning because you're rich. And you're like, no, because I wanted to win first and foremost. And then that sort of came with it. And the same thing with me. It was like, yes, I wanted financial success, but I wanted to be respected and feel successful first. And once that started to happen, financially, it increased exponentially. And I even found over the last 5 years where the possibilities of me to find more emotional success and more wins were gone. The television industry has completely changed. I already have pages of IMDb credits. I'm never going to have a giant hit like we used to back in the day. So there's no more winning for me in the television world as much. Oh. And so all of a sudden the financial rewards became less relevant. And that's why I sort of, ended up deciding to get out of television on a day-to-day basis, because it's just like there was nothing left there.
How does that make you feel now, though? Because that was, you've gone from living in Canada, you've come down here. It's like people recognize me because I can do this, and they're feeding me so that I feel great about it. And now there's either no substance or no future or no great reward within it. How does that feel for you, though? It's like being a tradesman, having your craft and being told your craft doesn't apply anymore.
It was awful. It was awful because I was still getting massive offers to come and run my own company or run people's companies from a development. So financially, it wasn't something that I could let go. And so I felt like it'd be, if you were a professional athlete and got hurt in the last game of the season, and you kind of know you're never going to play at that same level, but nobody else knows. So they're still offering you big contracts. And that's how I felt for the last 2 or 3 years, which is like, I just don't have the fire for this business anymore, but I'm still chasing dollars. And so that was, once I got out of that mode, and then I did the book and moved out of the day-to-day television, I sort of found my resurge again for a completely different style of industry. And then again, I've had a pretty good run there, so that's been a little bit of those wins again.
I find did it feel sad?
I didn't have time to feel sad. It was more like frustration just built, right? And annoyance built. And it's like, I remember I went out with a couple of TV shows that I knew were going to sell. There's lots of shows I know are going to sell, they sell. There's lots of shows I don't think are going to sell. I hope to get lucky. And then there's a few you're like, well, let's see if we can find somebody that wants it, right? But I mean, I wouldn't miss if I knew it was going to sell, because I run television networks. I know the world, and I would go out and I would be 100% sure these shows were going to sell, and then they wouldn't. And I was like, what is happening to me? Like, I'm losing my edge, and the world has changed out there. I don't know what's working and what's not working. And so that just became very frustrating, very frustrating. And I was just like, I don't want to do this. And then someone would get a new job at one of the networks, and it was somebody who was like my old assistant's assistant from 5 years ago. And I'd be like, oh my God, I got to call her or him and be like, oh, hi, Dave. Like, nice to, oh, we're so excited for you. Glad you got the job. Like, can we have lunch? And like, when I was in grind mode, I was excited about that. I had a spreadsheet of every single person I talked to and when the last time I had lunch with them and when their contract was up so I could call them and be like, and then I was like, yeah, I don't want to do that anymore. And so then I stopped being annoyed by having to make that phone call. And then I stopped making that phone call. And that's when I knew it's like, yeah, I'm not working hard enough. I can't chase these people.
Okay, so I know there's going to be people asking some of these questions and shouting at the screen right now. So before we move on to the book and the next stages of what you did, okay, what makes a TV show something that's sold? Because when you look at the stuff that's most popular with people on television nowadays, it's brain numbing.
Yeah, listen, and it's very subjective, right? It's just like music. You have a song that you're like, who would like that song? And it's very popular. TV's the same way. You have to get sort of what's in the culture at the moment, what people are wanting to see, what you can find a window in, and then you got to tell a great story. You have to have great marketing. You have to have a great night on television when there's nothing else on, so that you get people that watch it. You have to have luck from the Nielsen rating company that they happen to have one of those boxes that's working that the person tuned to. I mean, it's just such a pile of crap on what actually makes it work and what doesn't. And I have had shows that I've spent day and night in the edit bay overseeing with every fiber of my creative ability, and they don't work. And I've had shows where I told the network that I was going to be in the edit bay and I was going to watch it and I was going to take their notes seriously, and I didn't do any of that. I never looked at it. I never watched the show. I don't know what an episode looks like. And those shows rated and were big hits. And I've had everything in between. So the truth is, we don't really know. We don't really know. We do our best. We put everything out, but look at the media industry, television specifically. These are the best and the brightest and the most experienced people in creating television in the history of mankind, and we get 1 in 100 right. And most of the times we don't know which one it is. And so you're chasing your tail.
Wow.
This show worked. Let's go develop 12 other shows like that. Like we had The Biggest Loser, which turned out to be a big show. And we're like, well, let's go develop every version of a weight loss show we can. We sold 13 more weight loss shows because that was a formula that worked. And eventually that formula stopped working. So now we do other shows.
So that's quite interesting though, because if you look at how the kind of like the world's evolving, because Biggest Loser must be 10 years old, is it?
17.
17 years old. Okay, I remember watching it.
Yeah.
That was at a time where it was almost, what's the name of the female personal trainer lady that used to scream at them? Gillian, that's right. So the guy that was tough, but then the woman that was really tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she used to kick their ass, and you know.
Oh yeah.
But that was a time when you'd look at that fat person on the screen, and she'd be like, "Get up, you MFO," and all that kind of stuff, and they'd get up and hate her guts because of it. Okay, but nowadays I wonder whether you could even get away with doing that, because everyone will be like, "Oh, you're fat shaming this and you're fat shaming that," and
well,
how is it?
You'd still find something that would be pushing the envelope in some direction, right? So whether the line gets drawn and like, hey, this is now offensive and this isn't, it's a pain in the ass, obviously, and it seems ridiculous and arbitrary, but we don't really care making TV. I don't really care. If it's offensive, I won't say it. I just want to push the envelope and make you like gasp and watch it and be interested. And that's just really, really hard to do. And now there's just so many places to find content. We've trained the audience to have content free on YouTube and everywhere else and all the social media. So it's just really hard to crack through and break through with a big, interesting, dynamic, everybody gather around the TV show, at 8:00 it's almost impossible. It doesn't exist anymore.
That's one of the sad things, isn't it, about places like Netflix? In the olden days, I would put a TV show on and it'd be a cliffhanger, and then I have to wait a week.
Yeah.
So I could see it again.
Yeah.
And I'd make sure I was in front of the TV ready on Sunday at 7:30 or whatever it was, ready to go again.
Do you know how much content Netflix has? Like, I make the joke all the time. It's like, I have 3 shows on Netflix, but you'll never find them. So maybe I'll tell you I have 5. What's the difference? No one will ever know. Like, you can never find anything on there, right? So it's a very different world, and I'm very glad that I sort of moved out.
I'm having this conversation with you, and I know that Sophia's sat in the background there. We've just spent the last 2 years making a documentary on human trafficking.
Oh.
And so I care very much about it, and we've been in Bangladesh and Nepal and in Spain and Holland and stuff, like making this documentary. And I say to him, well, why are we making it? We just to have a documentary on human trafficking, or just to go on a trip to go and learn stuff? No, because we want it out there. We want people to learn from it. Yeah, but the challenge or the odds of it becoming successful are really low. Yeah.
Yes, it's better with a documentary film because it's one piece of content that you can use over and over again, that it doesn't it ages well. You can direct reach out to people. There's a great word of mouth to it. There's an appointment where it's like, I know where to go get it and watch it. Television doesn't have that. Whereas a documentary film actually has a better chance at impacting people and being, where people can find it. So you made a good decision there.
Okay. Come away from me. Let's talk about pitching. Okay. Sales, essentially.
Yeah, of course.
Pitching is what it is.
Yeah.
Okay. You're going to pitch somebody. Now, I was in Santa Monica about 4 years ago, asked to be a judge in a pitch contest where people with their new businesses came and they had 3 minutes to pitch.
That's right.
Okay. And there were over 2 days, I don't know, 20 companies that came in they were looking to raise finance, and they had their pitch. And so one guy walks on from Finland. He's got some crypto business. At the end of that 3 minutes, myself and the judges looked at each other. We had no idea what he was talking about. And my advice to him was, go find somebody else to pitch this.
Yeah.
And he was offended by that, but that's all I could say. Okay. Then there was a guy that came on called Coco Jack. He walked on. He had a leather apron on, big ginger beard. First thing he did is he cracked a joke, and then he told us a story about how he kept cutting his hands opening up coconuts, and he invented this product. Had me laughing, had me engaged, had me sold, saw a solution to a problem that didn't exist before. Okay, within 3 minutes, I sat there going, do you know what? I'd buy one. And that was the guy out of all of the people over the course of that day, okay, that I engaged with. Okay. Now, there were judges that had different opinions, but all of us agreed that he would be a kind of guy that we'd buy something from.
Yeah.
So tell me what you've learned over the years being in the space where you're pitching, TV shows, pitching business ideas. What mistakes people make typically, and are they that obvious that people don't know them? They should go to school to learn them.
It's really hard because it's not a skill that you learn in any part of your life normally. And then you compound that with the world has changed drastically. We are dealing with a hypersensitive, hyper short attention span audience that has had every version of every crap promise and promotional trick played on them for years. So people do not believe anything you say, any big promises you make to try to grab their attention, they are going to disprove in their mind instantly. So it's very hard to know how to navigate. And I have worked with 40 some odd Fortune 500 companies now. And there are several of them that I go and be like, when I'm sitting there in a room, like, there are 11 of you in this room and you've been doing this for 9 years with this product and you still don't know how to explain it. Like, how is that possible? And it's because the number one mistake is they think they have to have all of the information come out all at once. And when you're passionate about what you do and your idea and your business or product or service, every piece of information has perfect value to you. You know exactly what it's connected to. You know why it works the way it does. You know what it means and where it leads. And so we talk about that in Hollywood with script writing. Everybody who writes a screenplay thinks it's amazing. Well, of course, because they know every character and they know every scene and they know what's coming up next and they know the nuances and the secrets and all the things. So it's amazing for them. But if Aaron Sorkin writes a screenplay, he writes it so you know every nuance, so that you can see every scene and then you understand the characters. That's the difference. And in pitching and presenting in a business setting, your goal is to get your audience to understand the process, what your company does in pieces like a story, so that you can lead them to the conclusion that they want to be involved. And that's a very specific process. Human beings process information and make decisions in 3 very crucial steps, and it's the same for every decision. First, we conceptualize. We have to understand what it is we're talking about or looking at. Then we contextualize, meaning like, okay, how does this relate to me, or how can I use it, or how does it work in that sense? And then we actualize it. Then we decide what we want to do. I want to hear more. I want to ask about your IP protection. I want to know the price. Like, we do every single interaction like that. And so that's what I call the rationalization story. If you're going to explain a decision to someone or to yourself, you rationalize it. We're the only species that knows how to rationalize our decisions. And so that becomes this story. I want to know what it is. I want to know how it works. I want some validation of that, how it's going to impact me, and then I want to know what the next steps are. And so through the book, I developed this process, and I call it the WHAC method, WHAC, which is if you put a pitch in this format, what is it? How does it work? Are you sure is the A? Like, can you actually validate that? And then can you do it? What's the process? You find that you build your pitch the way people understand information, and you do it piece by piece at a time. And the number one thing I have to say to corporate CEOs or anybody that when I start working with them is I promise you'll get to say that. Like, it's not just only 3 minutes, it's the first 3 minutes. So I know you love this idea and I know you like these secondary revenue streams, but you got to get people to understand the basics first. And that is what people find so difficult. It's just a hard process. It's taken me 20 years to learn how to say things in 3 minutes.
Okay, so this fascinates and excites me, this type of conversation. So when and I've been in the wealth management industry for 30 years. Nobody cares where the money goes.
Yeah.
They care what happens.
Yeah.
So they care what the outcome is. So I give you $100, you're going to give me $110 back in 12 months' time. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but let me explain where it's going to go. And some people want to ask intelligent questions. They feel they need to ask intelligent questions, but the reality is the answer will just confuse them.
Right.
And they
don't care. They certainly
really
don't care yet. They might care later, but right now they want to know, what are you doing? How much money do you need? Why? What's the chance of me getting it back? Once I understand all that, then I might dig into your deck a little bit and ask some questions. I might actually engage. There's a very big difference between the information phase and the engagement phase. And that's where people get lost, is they want to throw in engagement questions and engagement ideas at their audience. And the audience is like, I don't even know what we're talking about yet. Like, I got to get my understanding.
Yeah.
It's a fundamental place of understanding. Then we can talk. You can turn that into a 2-hour meeting. But if you don't get through the first 3 minutes, and for most people, it's like, get through the first 30 seconds. At least just explain to them what it is. And I've worked with very, very large companies with, again, a dozen high-level executives. And to get the very first sentence of what we do, like, what is this company? What do we do? Sometimes it takes all afternoon. And they go from arguing over what they do to eventually arguing over the exact words, and words that mean the same thing, which is what you want. You want to get where you're talking about micro levels, but everybody finally agrees what this company does. And it takes me longer to get that first sentence than it gets to do all the other stuff underneath. Because once you get the first piece of understanding, you start to build on it, and it plays like a story, the way you would naturally do it.
Love this. So it's kind of, there's two things that come into my mind, one with my kids and one in business. It's sell the sizzle and not the steak. Okay. But also talking to my kids who love sausages. And when I first explained to them what was inside a sausage, they love sausages. They want sausage, they want ketchup, a hot dog. I'm like, what's inside it? They're like, it's sausage. I'm like, no, but what's really inside it? And they're like, it's sausage. I said, no, it's bum holes and eyelids.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Close enough.
but it tastes really good. If you tell them it's bum holes and eyelids before they taste it, they're not going to put it in their mouth, but they taste it and they like it. So you've got these big companies that can't verbalize what it is that they do. They can't articulate it. Sorry, they're essentially, are they searching for big words and punchlines, or what do you find in these experiences? What are they trying to do? Are they trying to give you something more intelligent maybe than any do? They
have all the intelligence and all the big words you could ever dream of. What they can't seem to do is to get people to understand the value of what they're building, presenting, launching, the way they see it. And so the main frustration is that we're not, everybody in the company isn't on the same page. We all sort of say a different message, but mostly it's like people just are confused. They don't understand that. So what I preach is simplification, right? It's how to simplify your message. And the truth is, it comes from this new, I mean, it's not super new, but it's kind of new. This is a world we live in called, be ready for it, because everybody's going to groan when they hear this. It's called decision by committee. And it is the new way that you have to deal with life. It's that nobody's making a decision until some committee talks it through and ruins it, right? Like, we all know the pain of that. And the truth is that you can't win at that pitch. You can't get to the next level unless you can give the person that's going to have to give it to somebody else the story. And so I tell people, it's like, hey, listen, it is simplify or suffer. That's your choice. Because if you don't want to simplify your idea and your business, they will. Because if I asked you about the last pitch you heard, you would give me a simplified version. And you know how you'd explain it? You'd go, here's what they do. Here's how they do it. Here's that I can, yes, they've done it 17 times already, or this is their sales, and here's what they're looking for. Like, you would simplify it. So if you're listening it in anywhere you're listening to this, just realize that if you're not simplifying your message, somebody else who's not qualified and doesn't work for you and isn't helping you is doing it for you. That's the way human beings work. And it's so much more beneficial to be the one that's simplifying the message and giving it to them ready to transmit to somebody else.
Do small business owners and coaches and people in that space find it harder or easier than a big corporation to learn how to do it?
I would say that it's easier. It's not sort of the size of the corporation, it's the personality type.
Okay.
I find that the A-type personalities have a harder time with it because they're like me, or it's like I can just overpower it with my charm and good looks. You know what I mean? Like, but I will overpower my shortfalls in the information by trying to use my personality or my sales tactics or my experience, my vocabulary to try to make up for that. And the problem is that people smell that from a mile away. Nobody wants to be sold. And so that's when you tend to be more salesy, and then you're dead. The second people feel like you're trying to sell them something, it's over for you. What I find is the sort of biotech CEOs of a public company who doesn't want to run a public company, wants to be in the lab, they actually do better, faster, because they don't want to be on stage. They don't want to be in the meeting. They're not trying to impress people with their words. They just want to get you the information and find out if you're interested. So when I say like, hey, trust me, if you just do it this way, you won't have to put on a performance. Doesn't matter what tie you wear. Doesn't matter your body language. All that stuff doesn't work anymore. That's old school thinking. Now it's like, can you get me the information that I want as quickly and efficiently as possible? That's what I want. And, you know, I do this big thing on stage where I talk about the hyper sort of focused attention span that people are all, you know, we have an attention span of 8 seconds, and a goldfish is at 9 seconds. So
the goldfish beating us now.
Yes. And so you ask, why is that? Is it because of social media, right? The iPhone, everybody's got a phone in their hand. It's like, it's actually not that. The truth is, we focus more intensely and efficiently than any other time in human history. If I give you my attention, I want value right now. Otherwise, I'm off to something else. So you have to be able to combat that. And what, as a sales guy, as you know, what we were taught was what's called the state and prove method. I'm going to state something that you want, sell the sizzle. Here's something. Would you like to lose weight and eat anything you want? You're like, oh, yes, I would. So now I'll tell you how to do that, and you're interested, right? That's the formation of the elevator pitch. And if I could have a time machine and we go back to the 1980s, maybe that might still work. I want you to picture yourself in an elevator today, and somebody gets in and they lean in and say, oh, excuse me, Spencer, I have an investment opportunity that can make you 4 times your money by the end of the year. Would that interest you? Do you lean into the person and be like, ooh, tell me more? Or do you lean out and be like, oh God, what a load of crap already, right? Like, if someone said to you, hey, I just came out of the lab, we've cured cancer, you'd be like, whatever, I'm sure you didn't, right? Like, you wouldn't believe them. That's the way state and prove works. And it's because we've blasted people with these over-promising, under-delivered life. Marketing, clickbait, all the commercials. So now what I teach is a formation called the inform and lead method, which is like, I'm going to give you the information in pieces, and I'm going to lead you to the conclusion I want. And that's how Hollywood storytelling is done. When we start a movie, we don't start with the ending and tell you what happens and then try to explain to you why you care. And it's like, we start with the little pieces and build you in. And by the end of the movie, you're like, you want it to end exactly the way it ends. If anybody has a movie they've watched 50 times, you still want it to end the same way, because that's how a story builds you to want the same thing. So building a pitch like that is really important.
And how many companies do you believe take that seriously? And how often do you see people, you know, just getting it so wrong, it's unimaginable?
I think that they know instinctively that they need to do that. And when I can unlock that for them, like, if I have these great little sort of 3-day seminars that strip down a business and rebuild it, and they can feel the power of it right away. And what it does, it changes the level of confidence they have in the marketplace. Because, and I will get calls from CEOs and emails saying, like, can you teach my sales force to be more confident? And it's like, no, confidence is not something you can teach somebody. You can pretend you're confident, but people know that. Confidence comes from your belief in the value you bring to others. If you believe what you have is valuable to others, you will be extremely confident. And I use the example on stage. Imagine if I was coming to pitch you to be the sort of caterer for your wedding. You and your bride are taking meetings, and I want to pitch you, let me cater your wedding. And I'm going to explain to you the chef that I have with me that's going to be there on your wedding day at the reception to cook for you. And my chef is Gordon Ramsay. How many words do you think I need to pitch you that idea, right? Like, when I have Gordon Ramsay, 4 words. Done, right? How am I going to be feeling? How confident will I be if I have that? I know what kind of value that brings to you. So now I don't use a lot of words. I'm not using giant adjectives. I'm not explaining to you his Michelin star histories. I'm not selling you anything. I'm excited. I'm confident. Now, flip that on its side. If it's my brother-in-law, he's an ex-convict. He just got out of jail. He doesn't really cook, but he's super mean, and he's pressing me for a job. And he says, if I don't get him a job, he's going to be really pissed. And I come to pitch you. How many words am I going to need to try to pitch you the idea that my chef is...
As many as you can until you get me at least a little bit triggered.
Yeah. Oh, the chef's not important. I'm really the thing. I'll be there the whole time. And I tell you, your pride, and you will notice, physically, I'm not confident. You can tell. And if I'm pretending to be confident, then I come across as a salesy, scuzzy kind of guy right away. And the more I talk and the more I pitch, the less you're going to believe me. And so that's why sort of the book is like, say less to get more. Like, if you say less, you will actually convey more value. And it does take a little while for people to understand that, but once they start, they're like, oh my God, it works. Like, and then they feel better. They're more confident. People trust them more. It's like, it opens up a lot of elements.
These are skills.
Yes.
Okay. And they're skills that are being taught and being learnt.
Yes.
Okay. But a lot of people don't believe the what we talk about is a skill. They believe it's some inbuilt personality disorder or order.
Yeah.
that we've got something. You're quite an extrovert, kind of outgoing guy.
Yeah.
You're friendly. You're quite chatty. That must mean it must be part of your kind of like your character and your personality. My grandmother would say you've got the gift of the gab or something like that. Yeah. Now, I want to punch people when I hear this kind of stuff, because I'm deeply offended by the fact that I worked for years and learned effective skills to be good at what I did. But a lot of people are also, because they don't think it's a skill and it's something to do with their character and personality, they don't feel they can do it.
Yeah, and I think that is the way we used to feel. It's like, oh, he could sell ice to an Eskimo.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, what the hell would I want to sell ice to an Eskimo for?
Yeah.
Like, who would do that?
Sand to the Arabs, yeah.
Right. It's just like, well, that's not really a compliment. And that isn't a skill, right? That is the ability to manipulate and to sort of sway people beyond something that they want. That's not what I teach at all. And I don't even think that's as possible as it used to be. It's very difficult. I worked with a company that wanted to change their timeshare business. But at the core of their timeshare business, it was like, we need to trick people into buying these things. And I was like, yeah, I can't help you do that. That's not what I do, right? What I can do is help you find the core of your information, where the value is, and get that to your audience right away so they can make an informed decision and not feel like you're selling them. And that's what people really want. And so the skill is not in the sales. The skill is not in the personality. The skill is in the ability to convey information clearly, concisely, and accurately. And if you can do that, it creates a system where the person wants to engage with you. And that's why you can take a 3-minute pitch and turn it into an hour meeting, because now they understand the process and they want to talk real things. It's not about them just like trying to figure out what it is that you do and why you're saying it this way. And then they're not trying to poke holes in your story. And I think that that's the skill. The skill is to learn and to trust that your information, if laid out in a proper story, will be compelling. If you don't believe that, that's a whole other issue. I can't help you with that. But if you have something of value and you want other people to understand it, that's what I do really well.
Got it. Did you write the book out of frustration, or did you write the book because you felt compelled to get this down in a book format? The reason I asked the question is that I wrote a book because I was told I needed to write a book, and I hated every part of writing the book. It wasn't a fun experience for me at all. And then I was told, once you're an author, you're an authority, and it's a real good value calling card for you, and all this kind of stuff. And still to this day, I don't believe that.
Yeah.
Okay. If I'd have written it out of being absolutely frustrated with everybody, then maybe it would have come from a different place. So tell me about yours.
So it was a total coincidence when I was at one of the places in LA, and somebody overheard me pitching some ideas to my family because I was having a bad day that day. And I was telling them about the ideas that the television network didn't buy. And they were like, "Oh my God, that's the greatest idea I've ever heard." And I was like, "I know, how could they not buy it?" Right. And I'd had a few drinks by then, so I was getting pretty loud, and and then I looked like a hero, and they were telling me how smart my ideas were. Well, surprise, surprise, Brant wants to pitch a few more ideas, right? So I had an investment banker come up to me after, and he said, "Hey, can you teach my clients to do what you do?" And I was like, "No, I can't teach people how to sell TV shows. I could barely do it." And he's like, "No, I want you to teach my clients how to pitch their ideas without putting them to sleep." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know, maybe." And so he happened to have a conference, and he invited me there, and it was an oil and gas company that he wanted me to come see. And I sat in on the pitch, and it was 22 minutes long, and it was the worst thing I'd ever heard in my life. This is a $2 billion company. And I was like, I have no idea why anybody would invest in your company. I'm not even sure what you did. I couldn't even believe that he would, this is a guy who ran this huge company, and this is how he spoke to people, and this is how he presented himself. I was just like, I can't believe this. And so they asked me, "Well, what did you think?" I was like, "Oh, I better listen to it again because I didn't get any of it. And I did go through it again." And and the audience is basically, again, sleeping by 23 minutes. Nobody asks questions at the end. And I heard him say that he could still drill for oil. And so I went after Master. I said, "Listen, I just want to make sure I heard this right. Did you say you could still drill for oil at $32 a barrel where everybody else is laying down their rigs at 37? And he's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "It took you 17 minutes to say that. You spent 3.5 minutes at the beginning telling people who's on your team and how you guys used to work at Chevron." And it's like, that's the only thing that was why did you wait so long? He's like, "I just said all this stuff." So we redid some of his slides. And sure enough, the next pitch actually went a little bit better. And there was a couple of questions in the audience, and he was like, "Oh," right? So he said, "Hey, can I come work with you? You got to help me redo the whole pitch." I was like, "I got a job, dude." No, he begged, and he came out on the weekend, flew into Los Angeles. So we went and did that. And I didn't have any idea about oil and gas. I was like, "Well, let me just show you how I would pitch this if I was trying to get people to understand it." And we chopped it up. And he left, and he seemed happy, and it seemed good to me, and I didn't think much of it. And 2 weeks later, he left a voice message on my phone, and you could hear the emotion in his voice. He was cracking a little bit, and he just said, "You've changed my life. I'll never be able to thank you enough for what you've done. We just completed our raise. I used to hate going on the road to do this. Now I'm excited to tell people what I do. My wife thinks you put something in my drink and changed me, but I just wanted to say thank you." And I was like, holy crap, no network president has ever said anything like that to me before, ever. And I am one chromosome away from being a caveman. So my ego was like, "Oh yeah, Brant likes this. Brant wants more of this," right? And you know the investment world. You make an investment banker some money, and he is your best friend. And he was like, "I got other clients you need to talk to." And so I do that again, and another client came, and I found pretty quickly that I liked doing that more than I liked doing the television stuff. And for me, the book was sort of like, I can't work with everybody. And there are companies that don't have the financial resources, or I don't have the time. And it was just like, I don't want to say no to anybody. I like being told how, again, I make the joke, I just want to hear how pretty I am. That's it, right? Yeah. So it's like, so the book became sort of like this ability to get it all into a sort of an instruction manual, how you can do it. And then, and that went pretty well. I got a big publisher, which was kind of fun. But it was interesting because the big publisher was like, it massaged her ego because I got to put Random House on my invites and things like that. But you realize pretty quickly, it's like, oh yeah, it's a lot of work. And the book, and I have another book deal, and I'm like, I don't want to write another book. I like this one. And I don't want to go through the process again, and I just want to keep doing this. So that's how the book sort of came, and I've been working on that since.
When you look at the type of clients that you ideally want to target moving forward, give me an idea of who's your perfect type of potential client?
You know, I like I have three sort of main criteria, right? One is I have to be able to be excited about the company. I have to be able to tell people like, what are you working on? I have to say like, oh, this is a cool company, right? Like, so it's got to have something of value underneath. It can't be like, hey, if we could pitch this better, people would be more interested, but I just want you to make our kind of crappy idea better. That doesn't work for me at all. So it's got to be something that's like a diamond in the rough kind of thing, where it's like, oh, if people understood this, they'd have to be interested. And I think that's good. A lot of people are frustrated. So I like being able to say that. For me, it's got to be people that are running or principals of the company that I could introduce to anybody in my network. Because a lot of times with clients, that's part of the gig where it's like, oh, I need to introduce you to them, or let me talk to you this person, or I want to get this sort of celebrity person as as part of an endorsement or something like that. There's an opportunity because of my weird Hollywood Rolodex to make some things. So if it's people that I don't think I want to introduce to people, that becomes problematic. And then the last thing, it just has to have big potential. Like I want things to work out. Like I don't want to be helping you increase sales incrementally by 3% year over year. Like if that's your goal, it's like, that's great. And you can do a lot of things to do that. And in theory, I guess you could pay me enough to go do that. But like for the most part, I'm looking for something that like can be a breakout success or change the course of what you do or land you a big sort of proposal or something like that. That kind of excites me. So that's sort of what I look for.
And when you look at the type of people you deal with in those organizations, are you always aiming to have the CEO, okay, as the guy that's leading this? Or sometimes is it the COO that gets on with it? Or are you dealing with,
never
chief
the
commercial
COO.
officer?
A lot of times it's the IR team. If it's a public company, a lot of time the IR team is like, oh my God, we need help. It is most times the CEO who'll come in and be like, hey, my organization is struggling in these 5 places and I need to sort of like restructure that. And I just had this happen in the Middle East where, she wanted me to come out and work with each one of her teams separately. And then once we got there, she's like, wait, I need us all to be in the room together because the larger company, we don't even know how to do our messaging. So it's always good from sort of the top, and I do have clients where the CEO, I've come to meet the CEO long after I've been engaged, and it's the team or the marketing team. And it's like 90% of the time that messaging has to come from the top and down. Like everybody's got to get on the same page, which is surprisingly easy. Because when you're only dealing with, those opening few sentences and you can pitch your entire business in, less than 3 minutes, it's easy to get everybody on board. So that's sort of my goal.
When you look back at your childhood and how you grew up with your mum and dad, is there some form of trail in there somewhere that led you to needing this acceptance that you spoke about in the early days? I mean,
yeah.
What's caused you to need that kind of like, it's almost like Popeye needed the spinach.
Yeah. That's tough, and I don't want to start crying no, I'm kidding, but it's like my parents were a little on the tough love side of things. My dad was like, he didn't wake up every day trying to figure out how to make me happy like I do with my kids, right? Like that's the new parenting move, right? And so it wasn't just like I was basked with, you're so great, Brant, you'll be wonderful. It was more like I was a bit of a jackass. And a bit is, depending on your definition of a bit, some might say a total jackass. And my dad was like, he had trouble with that, right? Because it's like, what are you going to amount to? You have no work ethic. You're such a goofball. And unfortunately for me, my verbal and, sort of cognitive abilities and my ability to communicate was way advanced for my maturity level. I was very stunted and very immature, but also very gifted verbally and persuasion. So that's not a good combination, right? Mm-hmm. Like, so that
you were gobby.
Yeah. And I just could not find acceptance. And so it became difficult. And I felt like I had so much to offer, and everybody was like, ugh, Brant, ugh. Like that's how I felt. And so I think it drove me to find a way. And I actually thought I was going to spend the rest of my life just trying to figure it out and never find it. And, and people ask, it's like, well, I'd been in people's living rooms trying to raise money for my stupid TV idea. And if I didn't get a check for $5,000, like I wouldn't eat. And so it teaches you how to sell, but more importantly, it teaches you how to not appear like you are desperate to sell. because if people feel like you'll say anything to make a sale, then they don't believe anything you say.
But hold on, go back a bit, because when that was happening, when you said you were immature but mature, your vocabulary was good, did you answer back a lot?
Yeah. And like, growing up in school, my teachers were at such a disadvantage because like if they wanted to call me out in front of the class, like I could flip that around on them and eat them alive in 8th grade, in 6th grade.
You're reminding me of somebody that was in my class at school.
Right.
And he said the teacher, he was lippy. I don't know what he said, but he was lippy. And the teacher pulled him out of the front and hit him on the hands with a ruler. And as he went to hit him on the hands with a ruler, the guy said, "Where does it say in your employment contract you can hit me on my hands with a ruler?"
Right.
And I would have never thought of that. I'd have been the one going, "Ah!" Okay, then I'd have cried all the way home, because I had these marks. But he said, "Where does it say in your employment contract you can do that?" And the teacher stopped.
Yeah.
And I was thought, you bastard, where did you learn that shit from? But it was like he had the foresight to be able to think, intelligently, but also then verbalize that in a way that was kind of ambivalent, but also a little bit of an undercurrent of a passive aggressive in his response.
See, I would be more like the kid who would try to get himself into that situation so I could use that line. Like he seemed like he might have more decorum. I was just a loose cannon in that sense, and like a class clown.
At 22 years old, that particular kid sold his business for $21 million.
There you go. So maybe I should have had more of that. That would have been nice. So yeah, that was just. It took me a while to catch up, where you could control, or the maturity to control your abilities matches with the situation, right? And and it's funny.
Did you feel misunderstood?
Oh, every day. Yeah.
And was that misunderstood, I'm going to be a terrorist, or was that misunderstood, you need to understand me better?
It was, you need to understand me better. If you just could see what I see, then you'd want to be involved. You'd buy in, right? That was the constant thing. If you could just understand it the way I understand it. I have to explain it again. I have to explain it 3 more times because you're not getting it. If you're saying no, it means you don't understand. Because there's no way I could be wrong about my idea. It's so good. And that took a little while to figure out how to explain that to people in a way that wasn't off-putting.
Okay. Lastly, before we end, tell us about your experience in the Middle East.
Well, I didn't have a lot of expectations of the Middle East. So when I got asked to go there, I initially was hesitant. And then when I looked up the company that was bringing me out, and she wanted me to come out there, and she was, one of the predominant female CEOs in Saudi Arabia, one of very few. And that really excited me because she was very, very sort of special. And I was like, oh yeah, I have to go work with this. They wanted me to come in and do the seminar and train their company. And I was like, oh yeah, I have to go do that. So I flew into Bahrain, and I was going to do that in Saudi Arabia. And I was so stunned how modern it was and how much English there was. And I felt so comfortable because my travels around the world, when I don't speak the language, I'm a little less comfortable because I can't be as commanding in the situation or as fun, or my defensive personality is to try to be sort of fun and interesting. And if you can't speak the language, it's very hard to do that. So I was able to speak the language and interact with everybody, which was like really exciting. Like, oh God, sorry. Which was really exciting to be able to interact with everybody and really get to understand the character and the culture, which I wasn't expecting to be able to do. Like I was expecting to be able to have an interpreter by me the entire time. So it just opened up everything, and I fell in love with the way the culture deals with hospitality and connection with people. And it felt so purposeful and proud. And I think, in the West, we're very loose. We're a little wild and ragtag and anything goes, which is great. But there is something to be said for a little more structure and decorum. And I really was drawn to it. I had an incredible time, met some incredible people, and I would love to go back.
When they all wear the same clothing, the kandura, you don't know whether they're the head of the police force or whether they're a guy on the street. So we always used to be, when I was first there, oh, hold on a minute, he's just walked in the room. Who is it that's walked in?
Well, I just found that, again, it felt like, it was like, because I was, wearing my fancy custom suits. And then I look at this like, wow, they're up one level than that. Like that is the top of the line right there. It's all pressed and and I just loved it. I loved it.
I always wonder how they keep them so clean.
I know, right?
Not a mark on them.
Not a mark on it, as white as it can be. Not a single mark, perfectly pressed. I was like, damn. It came out today. And I was like, oh, I'm in my suit, like me.
There's a funny story of a lady that I know that went to work in the Middle East for Emirates Airlines. She had her training, and then in her third week of the job, she was serving food, and she spilt ketchup on the shoulder of somebody wearing a Kandora. And if she listens to this, she knows who it is.
Yeah.
And she didn't know what to do. Should she tell him? Should she not tell him? Should she tell him? So she decided not to tell him. He left the plane with tomato ketchup on his. I just think to myself,
I thought it because must have been 300 people, 300 men at this luncheon announcement at Saudi Aramco. And I was like, there's no way that out of 300 of these people, somebody's not spilling something from lunch on them, right? And so then what do you do? It's just it's a big white, it's like a billboard, right?
That's right.
So,
In the winter, they wear different colors. A friend of mine, Omar Al-Baswadi, the first time I met him, because they usually wear sandals, the guys, yeah? And so I meet him, he's in his Kandora, and he's got bright orange Nike sneakers on. Oh. And I'm looking, I didn't know what to do. Should I ask? Should I not ask? What do I do? And I said to him, I need to ask, why are you wearing these bright orange sneakers? He says to me, have you ever worn those sandals? What do you mean? He goes, these are way more comfortable than those sandals.
Oh I loved it. So, I'm a big fan. I'm looking forward to going back. So.
Excellent stuff. Well, thank you so much for coming to tell your story and join us on the show today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yes, indeed.
Thanks for your time, Brant.
You got it.